This is Charlie Higson, author, actor, still. I mean,
yeah, I do. I mean, if anyone asks me what I do, I say I'm a writer, but because that always comes first. But I do love performing
still.
As well. Still, yes.
Do you...
we just did a fast show tour, and that was great fun being on stage in lovely theatres. So.
And how did it go down? Because I mean, I'm a fast show fan and generation of the fast show sort of thing. So first of all, I'll ask how was it for you. Then I'll ask how was it for the audience. So because they're sketches, it was a sketch show.
Well, it was a nostalgia fest. It was greatest hits. We were talking about the show, talking to each other, talking to the audience, and out of that, sketches would emerge. So it was the idea was to sort of connect with the audience and for them to genuinely feel that they were getting insight.
Sure.
And it was lovely. You know, we had such nice audiences. We didn't have to go out every night and think, okay, we've got to win them over.
Yes.
We almost had to set them down and say, look, you've got 2 hours of this. Don't peak too soon. I've walked on stage. That's all I've done.
Yeah.
Wait for the jokes.
Yeah, exactly. Spread the butter on the bread. Not a big lump of it.
But no, it was a lovely thing to do. And you know, we had such great comments from the audience of just saying, you know, because they were there with other people they didn't know, but they were all fans together. So it was.
Did you have to tweak your act in terms of how some of the sketches or jokes might have aged? You know, so things that changed.
Well, not really. I mean, occasionally we might make a comment on that.
Yeah.
But
like you can't say that anymore and move on. Yeah.
Well, we did in a Suit You sketch. I do with Paul where I play the customer, and I come out of character and say, "Oh, you can't say that." He said, "Well, I just did say, didn't I?"
Yeah.
I suppose you did.
Yeah. Okay. We're here to talk about the paperback edition of your book on His Majesty's Secret Service, and this is a James Bond adventure. So where to begin with this? Let's go to the Young Bond series.
Right.
You've sold over 1 million copies of that. It has struck a chord with a generation. Tell us about the genesis of that. I'm intrigued to know how they approached you about it.
Well, I wrote 4 crime thrillers in the early 90s, and then the whole TV thing just took over, making the fast show. I didn't have time to be writing books anymore, which was a shame, but I'd always wanted to go back. And then when I had kids, I thought it'd be really good to sort of take a bit of time off from the treadmill of TV, be home a little bit more. I thought it'd be great if I could find some kind of action-adventure series I could write for them, because I had 3 boys. And I was approached by my editor, who I'd worked with in the early 90s, who was now working for the Ian Fleming estate. Yeah. And they said, she said, look, we're looking for someone to write these young Bond series. I know you like James Bond. I think your style would work with kids. I know you've got 3 boys. Would you be interested in writing young Bond? And I thought, well, of course I would.
Yeah, what a buzz.
To be able to sit down and write, you know, the name's Bond, James Bond.
Yeah.
It was such a sort of, gave me such an adolescent thrill.
Yeah.
And it was perfect for my boys, and and you know, to be allowed to play in the world of James Bond was amazing.
What a buzz! As like I say, because Bond, for whatever reason, he's been part of the pop cultural and literary landscape for so many decades. Yes. I mean, when I was a kid growing up, and it's like Doctor Who. You have your Bond of your generation,
exactly.
And then you have your favorite Bond, regardless of your generation. and so you were dealing with precious material. I mean, the Ian Fleming estate wouldn't have picked you lightly.
No, I mean, you know, there was a vetting process.
Of course.
And they talked to a lot of people, and they decided to go with me. The great thing about starting with the young Bond was that was new. No one had done it. There had been a pretty poor teenage Bond animated series, James Bond Jr. or something.
Yeah.
But Fleming didn't write about Bond's childhood. There's very little in the books about it. So I could sort of do a new incarnation of Bond that hadn't been done before. Yeah. And it was set in the 1930s, so it was kind of separated from the whole modern world of the sort of cinematic Bond.
So you're in the pre-war situation.
Tying in with Fleming's Bond. So, you know, it was a whole new, as I say, a whole new incarnation of Bond that I could play with. But having done them, I thought actually I'd really love to have a go at doing the adult Bond.
Did you? Did you have that in you? That's
I
interesting.
did. You know,
what was that? What was that
drive?
I'd
absorbed so much about Bond. I'd studied so much. I'd read, you know, so much about it, and tried to get inside the mind of Ian Fleming. I'd met members of his family, and you know, I sort of had. I hate to say it's a terrible phrase to use, but the DNA of Bond. Yeah. I kind of had it in me, so I was just waiting to be given the call.
Well, what a lovely position to be in. And had you gone to GoldenEye, Jamaica? Had you done
yes, I had done that. Very luckily, I got taken on a. There was a press junket. It was for one of the films. They took one of the men's magazines. Took a load of journalists out there, So yeah, we actually stayed in Goldeneye and met the people there.
Okay, so you got to Stanislavski's School of
yes,
yeah,
exactly.
Tell me, I think if James Bond was a guest on this show, I'd love to talk to him about his childhood, to try and see what shaped this cold, womanizing, heavy drinking, clearly burnt figure.
He's a damaged individual,
Yeah.
and Fleming presented him as such from the start. Interestingly, there's only a couple of mentions of his childhood in the books, and Bond sort of says, "Would that small boy on the beach making sandcastles recognise the man I've become?"
Now you had to latch onto that.
I had to start
Absolutely.
with that ordinary boy, and through the process of the 5 books that I wrote about young Bond, show the experiences that happened to him that would have led to him growing up to be that kind of a man.
Tell me about the humour, because we associate Bond as watching the movies. We see Roger Moore's eyebrows, and you know what I mean, and Sean Connery's kind of pithy witticisms as he's walking out of the bedroom over the shoulder. So that's probably on the director and the actor, as opposed to maybe Fleming. So tell me how you approach that as somebody who's got obviously a funny bone.
Yeah, well, just as a very quick aside, because
Yes.
you mentioned eyebrows.
Yes.
Obviously, with Roger Moore's eyebrow singular, really, is where all the acting is. But when they were casting Sean Connery, and famously he was a fairly rough, tough Scottish working class guy, and he needed to be groomed. And I can't remember who it was, whether it was the director or Ian Fleming himself, who said, just run a lawnmower over those eyebrows and you've got a star there.
I love that.
But yes, I mean, humour, there isn't much in Fleming. In Fleming's Bond, he is not a wisecracking quip master. He's quite direct and gets on with it. There is humour in the book, but it mainly comes from Ian Fleming's narration of the books. His sort of
As opposed to the
smoky gentleman's club drawl in the way that he tells the stories. And Bond himself is quite... Yeah, he's just this kind of... not a blank slate, but a blunt object.
He's about, 35 years old?
He's 35 years old, and Fleming tried to keep him 35 years old
like a
for
cartoon.
10 years.
For 10 years.
Yes. But yeah, the humour, I guess, came in with Connery, where they started, because in the 60s they were able to make him this sort of quite cynical, flip character. And you can see it growing through the films and then obviously reaching its peak with the Roger Moore versions.
Would you like to go for a martini with James Bond, do you think, if you met him? Or is he a bit odious? I mean, how would you...
Depends which version of it. I mean, the great thing about Bond, what he is Fleming was sort of creating his idea of what the ultimate gentleman is. Yeah. You always knew if you went out for dinner with him, you'd be in safe hands. You wouldn't have that awkward thing at the end of the meal of like, well, how much do we tip? He would know exactly, and he wouldn't mention it, and he would just get on and do it. And everybody would be deferential to him. Oh, good evening, Mr. Bond.
Yes.
And he'd order the drinks. Yeah, he might do a bit of ordering for you.
Yes.
He certainly does for the women in the books. Yeah. But, Bond is that classic, whether he's an actual psychopath, I don't know. But he is certainly someone you'd like on your side if you were in a very tricky situation.
Of course.
You think, okay, this man will sort it out. He'll hold my hand and walk me through this.
Does 2024 James Bond? I mean, is he a vegan? Does he want oat milk with his coffee? I mean, do we have to? Is he buffed?
Well,
is he in the gym a lot?
There were a few comments about my book on His Majesty's Secret Service when it came out. Some people picked up on the fact that he was interested in drinking kombucha and kefir and all this stuff to encourage his gut health. But he reckoned, because there's this theory that the gut is a very primitive brain, and it sort of it's very linked with your top thinking brain. This is your gut sense, your gut feeling about things. And he figures, well, if that's true, and I can improve my gut health, and that gives me a split-second advantage over someone else when we both pull our guns out at the same time, I'm going to go with it.
Get the kombucha.
Yeah. And Fleming was really interested in food in all the books. There's descriptions of the meals that Bond is having, particularly as they were written in the 50s. Yeah. We still had rationing in England. So this idea that this guy was travelling the world on glamorous jet planes and staying in hotels, eating these amazing meals, that was part of the sort of pornography
and the escapism of it. Yeah.
Yes.
Your paperback edition of the Sunday Times bestseller on His Majesty's Secret Service. I mean, in an odd way, it tells its own bit of history, because it's His Majesty's Secret Service, not hers. So things are changing, you know.
It was, I mean, a complete change. Last year, 2023, it was the 70th anniversary of Casino Royale, the first Bond book being published. And that came out in the same year that the Queen had her coronation.
Yes.
And you know, last year with the new coronation, it definitely felt like the end of an era and the beginning of a new one.
Yeah.
And the Fleming estate approached me and said, look, we want to do something for the coronation. It'll all be for charity. All proceeds go to charity. We've got a title, which we think is great, on His Majesty's Secret Service. I said, yes, great title.
Yeah.
They said, but we don't really know what the book is.
So tell us the story, because it's a great yarn and it's all tied in with the coronation and everything.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, you know, they said it was for charity, and they were quite keen for the royal charities to be involved. And so they said, you know, probably best not write something about coronation being disrupted or a plot to assassinate Charles. At which point I said, are you crazy?
You've just given me the plot.
Yes. I'm already writing it in my head. And I said, oh, all right, yes. So the proceeds now go to the National Literacy Trust.
Lovely.
National Literacy Trust, who is a charity that I work a lot with, and Queen Camilla does as well, so she's a patron. So it was lovely to do that. And it was going to be a short story originally, but I got so carried away. I said earlier I had all this kind of the world of James Bond inside me, and I just sort of splurged it all out and had just such fun writing it. And it also coincided because I was also launching a podcast for the coronation called Willy Willy Harry Stee, which is a history of the British monarchy.
Yeah.
So I'd been researching that whole side of thing, and this idea that there's this pure unbroken line going right back to William I is nonsense. It's all over the place, and we're importing royalty from foreign countries and everything to try and make it work.
It's a patchwork.
Yes, exactly. And you know, I also found out that there are people out there who are absolutely obsessed about the Anglo-Saxon royal line, the House of Wessex, and they're saying we should bring it back, you know, the Order of the White Dragon. And I thought, well, that's a great starting point for a Bond villain in the book.
Yeah, this is tying up all your interests here.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love this.
So to pull it all together, so the main villain is a guy called Athelstan, who has put together, Bond is sent because M says, look, this guy appears to be plotting to disrupt the coronation and try and get himself crowned as the legitimate King of England, because he can trace his line back further. But M says, this guy is not stupid, he's extremely wealthy, he must know that he hasn't got a hope in hell of actually pulling this off. Therefore, he must be up to something else. This must be a front for what he's really up to.
Yes.
And Bond has to go in and discover what's really going on. And, you know, he does all the James Bond things.
I love it.
He drives fast cars, he drinks, he goes to bed with a couple of beautiful women, and he gets to shoot people.
Yeah, that makes him James Bond. It's funny when you watch something like Slow Horses or read Mick Herron's books, how being a spy is probably in real life one of the most boring jobs of all time. And does that make sense? I've heard somebody say that you can sit in a terrace house for 6 months twitching a curtain. And,
or you go undercover for 10 years in some foreign country, posing as someone in charge of the sewers or something. In order to infiltrate it. Yes, James Bond is not a spy. He doesn't do any spying at all.
Yeah, he's a cartoon.
He said, look, here's your mission. Go and sort it out. Go and kill this bloke.
How much fun was it for you? Because you've explained how you were dying to have a go at this, if you want to call it the senior level Bond, as opposed to the young James Bond. How much of a kick was it for you? Did you?
Oh, it was huge fun. And, I set out to write a short story. It ended up as, over 40,000 words. It's the same sort of length as the shortest books that Fleming wrote. And partly it was because Fleming created this great structure to make the stories work. And if you stick to that, you get all the Bond elements. Basically, Bond goes in and sees M. M says, this guy is up to something. Can you go and sort him out? Now, normally that would be like the first third of a mystery book, is finding all that stuff out. But he just gives him a file and says, this is a bad guy, go and deal with him. And he does. There are no twists and turns and dramatic changes. He just goes off. And the story's the same. He meets the guy, he gets close to him. He infiltrates his world, he meets the girl, he gets captured and tortured, he turns the tables, he escapes and ends up with the girl.
You've described every film we've ever seen.
Well, all the best ones stick to that structure.
Well, Agatha Christie was doing it. Why wouldn't Ian Fleming do it? Why wouldn't Charlie Higson do it?
Exactly.
It's a formula and they work for a reason.
Yeah. And then, Fleming a couple of times tried to deviate, and it wasn't successful.
Yeah. It didn't work out so much. But congratulations on it, on the book, on His Majesty's Secret Service. That's available now. And you just say all proceeds going to the National Literacy Trust.
That's right.
What a worthy charity that is too. Charlie, it's been a real pleasure talking to you.
Well, likewise, yeah.
Thanks for your time today. I wish you well. And your podcast is going too. Has that landed yet? Or
Yeah. We're Elizabeth II is out tomorrow.
Oh, fascinating.
I talk for about half an hour about the monarch, and then I have an expert on, and my expert tomorrow is Dominic Sandbrook, that people will be familiar with from the rest is history.
The rest is history.
And then next week we do Charles III. So
Charles III.
Yes.
Okay, not Edward III. No. I have a deep interest in Edward III.
We did him.
Yeah, well,
he's there.
He's my relative.
You can go and check him out.
No, we did Who Do You Think You Are at home in Ireland.
Right.
And they follow, and they got my granddads, and they were like, yeah, Irish nationalists, shoot them up, bang, bang. Then they brought me over to the Royal College of Heraldry and said, now to see this, Gene? I went, yeah, where are you going? They go, you were related to Edward III. I said, and the film crew were going, ha. So, yeah. Anyway, I'll listen back to that podcast episode to see how my relative fares. Charlie Higson, what a pleasure. Thanks for your time today.
Yeah, it'd be great to be here.
Thank you.